Hey guys, in this video, I want to talk to you about some of the early warning signs of elevated estrogen and what you can do to start correcting it. Although estrogen is considered to be a female hormone that is beneficial for everything feminine in the female organism, the fact of the matter is, since the early 1940s, estrogen has been known and proven to contribute to cancer. It's commonly known to contribute to specifically breast cancer and prostate cancer when elevated. It contributes to abnormal clotting and bleeding issues, infertility, and a wide variety of other issues. In fact, most of the pathological events that are seen in aging can be contributed to excess estrogen. So as I say in these videos all the time, if you're familiar with our YouTube channel, estrogen is not really this female hormone as much as it is a stress hormone. It is known to rise under acute stress. For example, estrogen is known to double in the blood after aerobic exercise or intense cardiovascular exercise. And estrogen also stimulates a stress response by acting on the adrenal glands, stimulating the secretion of the classic stress hormone, cortisol. And as we talk about frequently on the YouTube channel, estrogen is a major contributing factor to hypothyroidism. It generally opposes the functioning of the thyroid hormone. It works in an opposite direction and therefore has an anti-thyroid or anti-metabolic effect, which is really the root cause behind all of its negative effects in the body, is through suppressing proper metabolic function. So obviously we want to keep estrogen levels to a minimum. When estrogen levels are chronically high, when they are specifically higher than progesterone or testosterone, or if you have deficient levels of progesterone, testosterone, so making the progesterone and testosterone lower than the estrogen, you're going to run into this issue known as estrogen dominance. And again, this is highly implicated in a wide variety of issues. Most health issues are related to hormonal imbalances, and the major hormonal imbalances that tend to occur is an elevation or an inverted ratio of the stressful hormones like estrogen to your more protective hormones like progesterone and testosterone. So with all this being said, I want to dive into some of the common early signs or symptoms of excess estrogen or estrogen dominance. And hopefully through becoming aware of these various signs and symptoms, you might have some insight as to what's going on hormonally in your body and therefore a route of treatment. In this case, lowering excess estrogen. So one of the first early signs of excess estrogen is excess weight gain. If you're struggling with any sort of excess fat or unwanted, unnecessary weight, it's likely your estrogen levels are higher than they should be. And exactly how estrogen contributes to stubborn fat gain and difficulties losing that fat is by opposing the functioning of the thyroid gland, which is the key gland for regulating the whole metabolism, fat metabolism included. So when the thyroid becomes low, the body has a difficult time using fat or using any sort of nutrient for energy. So it slows the metabolic rate, which is the process of turning your food into energy. And that's going to result in an accumulation of improperly metabolized nutrients in food that ultimately store as adipose tissue. So a simple way of looking at it is if you're taking in X amount of energy in the terms of calories or nutrients or food, but you're only metabolizing half of that, the rest of it typically stores as fat tissue or adipose tissue. And estrogen actually has an affinity towards the fat cells in your body. So it can create a vicious cycle where the more fat you accumulate, the more estrogen you accumulate in your tissues as well, leading to a vicious cycle of high estrogen and high fat accumulation. Number two, if you're a woman, one early symptom or sign of excess estrogen or estrogen dominance is heavy menstrual bleeding. And in fact, any sort of difficulties with your menstrual cycle may indicate high estrogen. So the fact of the matter is the menstrual cycle is not supposed to be this horrifying, crippling experience. It's supposed to be about 3 or 4 days long and rather light. It shouldn't be incredibly painful, uncomfortable, and unpleasant. So if you're specifically experiencing heavy menstrual bleeding, like blood clots, this could be a major sign of excess estrogen. And this is because estrogen can actually decrease blood volume and take the water out of the blood, leading to less fluid blood and more likelihood to form blood clots and therefore have a difficult time bleeding throughout the menstrual cycle. And at the same time, estrogen has a relationship with progesterone. So estrogen does initiate the whole menstrual cycle. In this way, it's beneficial, but progesterone is what stops and ends the cycle. So if you also have very long, drawn out menstrual cycles, it could be because you have more estrogen to progesterone. But again, really any issues with your menstrual cycle may indicate high estrogen. So everything from painful, uncomfortable, cramping, and major discomfort with your period could be a sign of excess estrogen, because estrogen tends to lead to edema. So it can cause swelling and water retention that attributes to the feeling of being bloated. In terms of bleeding, again, it takes that water out of the blood, leading to thick blood, a higher blood volume, resulting in a greater likelihood of blood clots or abnormal clotting. And it's also just going to lead to a general irregulation of the period. So maybe you're getting your period too early, too late, or it's lasting a very long time. These are all common signs of elevated estrogen, specifically higher estrogen than progesterone in this case. Number 4, a major sign or symptom of high estrogen for men and women would actually be the loss of libido, sex drive, and your overall sexual desire, and also maybe even sexual function to a degree. So in the case for men, this could be erectile dysfunction. And this is because of the simple fact that estrogen, again, opposes testosterone, the most important sex steroid hormone responsible for a healthy sex drive, libido, and even your fertility levels are dependent on healthy testosterone levels. And you generally want higher testosterone to estrogen in ratio. But another problem with elevated estrogen is that estrogen stimulates the production of prolactin. So it can cause hyperprolactinemia, which is one of the major, perhaps the number one cause of things like erectile dysfunction, as I've talked about in earlier videos. So the combination of high estrogen and prolactin is going to be detrimental to your overall sexual health, your sexual vigor, and your sexual function. Moving along, mental and mood imbalances, specifically chronic depression and anxiety, may be early signs or symptoms of elevated estrogen. As seen in studies like this one, elevated levels of estradiol, the potent form of estrogen, is known to cause depressive symptoms. And this is likely due to the fact that estrogen opposes the function of the thyroid. And the thyroid is what's responsible for the production of ATP, or energy. So although depression, anxiety, these are mental and mood imbalances, they are experienced physiologically as well. So oftentimes people who are hypothyroid feel depressed because they are physically not producing enough energy. And this can obviously result in a low supply of energy to the brain for producing all the correct neurochemicals to experience positive, feel-good emotions. So certainly mental and mood imbalances, they stem from the mind, the psyche, or spirit. So most mental and mood imbalances are created by particular thoughts, beliefs, considerations, and these things negatively affect the body. However, the body does also affect our state of mind and our psyche. So if your body is riddled with excess estrogen and your thyroid is not functioning properly, resulting in low energy production, this could lead to depressive symptoms. Next, chronic headaches and migraines may also be an early indicator of elevated estrogen levels. And this is because estrogen tends to induce the production of nitric oxide synthase, which can actually tighten the capillaries and restrict blood flow up to the brain, causing a brain deficiency that could result in a headache or a migraine. Another major symptom of elevated estrogen levels, perhaps one of the major symptoms or signs of elevated estrogen, is any sort of hair loss. So hair thinning, this could be a pattern baldness, androgenic alopecia, diffuse thinning. Any sort of hair loss is a major symptom of hypothyroidism, as we always talk about. And hypothyroidism pretty much goes hand in hand with elevated estrogen, because these two things also oppose and regulate one another. So on one hand, exposing yourself to tons and tons of estrogen through your diet, through environment, can oppose the function of the thyroid, but also if your thyroid function gets low, this can cause estrogen levels to be unregulated and unopposed and elevate and become sky high. And how it contributes to hair loss is a very systemic issue. If you want to learn more about estrogen's many contributions to hair thinning, hair loss, be sure to check out our Forever Healthy Hair course. Otherwise, some of the basic things that estrogen does in regards to causing hair thinning and hair loss is first and foremost opposing the function of the thyroid. And the thyroid hormone is actually the hormone that regulates hair growth. So there's actual receptor sites in your hair follicle for thyroid hormone. In fact, thyroid hormone has literally been referred to as mitochondrial hair medicine, because without the thyroid hormone, the mitochondria in the hair follicle cannot produce energy to grow the hair. So in other words, high estrogen means low thyroid, That means less thyroid hormone for regulating the hair. This can lead to all sorts of hair issues. Next, insomnia and any sort of sleep trouble may be a sign of elevated estrogen. There are many causes for this, mostly related to low thyroid function, which causes an elevation in stress hormones that disrupt sleep. But another major thing that estrogen does in regards to poor sleep quality is it inhibits monoamines oxidase A, which causes an elevation or an increased production of serotonin. And serotonin does not actually contribute to good sleep. It's actually a metabolic suppressing agent. Serotonin slows the metabolic rate, and this can lead to disturbances and sleep trouble. So the simple way to look at it is sleep actually requires good energy. That seems counterproductive maybe to some people. Why would you want to be energized before you're going to go to sleep? But I'm referring to biological energy and not stimulation. So you need energy, ATP, mitochondrial energy, to produce new cells, to repair your cells, to regenerate, to produce hormones. You need it for everything. So low energy production will interfere with sleep. Sleep does require energy. All the various hormones that you need for good quality sleep are dependent on energy, and estrogen can impair mitochondrial energy production in this way. And last, but certainly not least, perhaps the number one sign or symptom of elevated estrogen is hypothyroidism. If you have hypothyroidism, you likely have elevated estrogen levels. If you're wondering whether you have hypothyroidism or not, then definitely have your estrogen levels checked. Remember, estrogen is a stress hormone. It rises under stress. It stimulates the stress response. And the basic thing it does in the body is it opposes thyroid function. So it's an anti-thyroid substance. Thyroid hormone regulates oxygen consumption. Estrogen impairs oxygen consumption. It steals oxygen from your cells. So it has the most basic fundamental anti-thyroid effect. And ultimately, all the signs and symptoms we talked about here today could also be applied to hypothyroidism. A lot of these are just the signs or symptoms of hypothyroidism. But again, because of their opposing nature, if your thyroid hormone is low, then estrogen levels are going to be left unopposed and become very high. So if you have hypothyroidism or any of the symptoms of it, you likely have high estrogen. So with all this being said, I just want to give you a few quick tips for lowering elevated levels of estrogen, but also keep in mind that we have various videos here on the YouTube channel that go into depth about how to do that. So be sure to check out these other videos as well. In addition to that, I would highly recommend grabbing one of our online courses for a complete protocol for correcting and fixing your thyroid and metabolism. Ultimately, if you get the thyroid back into good shape, then you're going to naturally lower your estrogen levels. So what I'm saying is the best protocol or regimen for lowering or regulating high estrogen levels is a healthy thyroid or improving your thyroid function. If your thyroid's working good, it will keep estrogen in check. So improving your thyroid function is perhaps the number one thing that you could do to regulate your estrogen levels. Some of my favorite things for achieving this are herbs like ashwagandha, the number one thyroid herb. So be sure to check out some ashwagandha if you're dealing with high estrogen and low thyroid. Not only does it increase the protective hormones, it increases the functioning of the thyroid and the conversion, but it also inhibits the production of cortisol and prolactin. So it's likely going to have a systemic ability to lower estrogen. Some other things I'd highly consider doing if you have high estrogen would be to take a look at some of the powerful anti-estrogen foods and herbs. So just to name a few, celery, parsley, oranges, and simple everyday white button mushrooms or agaricus mushrooms, shiitake mushrooms, any sort of cooked mushroom. All these foods have powerful anti-estrogen effects. In terms of herbs, some of the most potent and well-studied are nettle root, agaricus mushroom, and milk thistle for lowering elevated levels of estrogen. So those are just a few places to get started in lowering elevated levels of estrogen. Remember, the ultimate goal would be to improve your thyroid function, which will keep your estrogen levels in check naturally. But you will want to check out our other YouTube videos to get some lifestyle tips because estrogen is all around us in our modern environment, not just in our food and pharmaceuticals and things like that, but it's all over the place. So definitely watch those videos to get additional tips outside of this video. That does bring this video to a close though, so if you've enjoyed it, be sure to give it a thumbs up, share it with anybody that might find it helpful or useful. If you're interested in learning more and gaining more help from us outside of our YouTube channel, we have additional resources on our website. We have a blog and a tonic herb shop, and we also have an online wellness academy where we offer a couple of very in-depth, well-studied courses for improving your overall health. So again, if you're interested in learning more beyond this YouTube channel, be sure to check those things out, which you can find in the description box below.